In this tutorial, we'll be giving tips on how to take an idea you have and turn it into a move. If you have not watched our last video on conceptualization yet, make sure you check that out first. So, if you're watching this video, we assume you have an idea for a move to work with. This idea could be a general theme or a particularly interesting movement. More often than not, the idea or movement you have in mind occurs in the middle of the move. Because when you brainstorm, you generally do not consider that the deck has to start square and end square. For example, when I conceptualized my move Brusque, the idea was to create two triangles using two pharaohs. I did not have in mind how I should open or close the move. If your idea happens to be an opener or a closer, you will also need a corresponding closer for your opener, an opener for your closer to complete your move. You might be thinking to yourself, but I already have an opener and closer. How could I possibly start and complete the central part of my move without an existing opener and closer? And the answer is that you can, but if the current opener and closer are the first you came up with for the move, they likely aren't the best opener and closer for your move. The first opener and closer you find are often just placeholders. The time it takes to search for the right opener and closer for a move could take a very long time. Occasionally, it could be an hour, but other times it could take years. You're ultimately trying to work forwards and backwards to find the best possible combination of movements out of all existing combinations for your move. So if you don't immediately find an opener or closer that you like, do not get frustrated. It is supposed to be hard. Our friend Matt Beaudouin details this process in his book Exploded Process, which we will link in the description. We highly recommend you check it out if you're interested in learning more about the creative process for cardistry. With all that said, we will start discussing closers first. There are two obvious ways to come up with a closer for your move. The first is to simply perform the central part of your move that you came up with and then work forward from there, with the goal of ending with a squared deck. So let's take my move Brusque as an example. For Brusque, after forming two triangles with the cascades from two pharaohs, I end up in this position. I experimented with many ways to try and close this display. This was my original closer, as it seemed like the most obvious thing to do. But after some experimentation, I found my current closer and found it to be a lot more aesthetically pleasing, because of the merging of these two triangles here. The second method is to link existing closers that you have. This method applies more to two-hand cuts. Oftentimes, when you're in the first stage of ideation, you will come up with closers that you don't know what to do with, and this is the time to apply them. Try to link the current idea you have with a closer that you already have in mind. It is important to be picky about your closers when you do so though, because they were not created at the same time as your central idea, they often won't be thematically compatible. A good example of this would be my move Minesweeper. So this is the original closer that I had for the move. It looks decent on its own, but it doesn't work with the move because the move mostly occurs on a 2D plane. So, it would be better to find a closer that sticks to the theme, which is how I found my current closer. So, those are the two main methods to come up with closers. The opener is actually very similar. You can also collect and link existing openers to your central idea. But the other method of working backwards to find an opener will obviously be harder, as you will need to try to reverse a move either with your hands or in your head, and you will oftentimes be working against gravity too. Unfortunately, there is no easy solution to this problem. You will just have to go through this process repeatedly, and you will become more skilled over time. So here's an example of a move where I originally had a very clunky opener. So, as you can probably tell, the important part of this move is here, where I use this bottom packet to flip the packet on top here, backwards to be clipped between these two packets. So, to get to that part, I need to be in this position. So I eventually thought that instead of doing my original opener, which had this unnecessary movement over here, I could just do this instead. So I have been using this opener ever since. It is a lot more concise, has better rhythm, and does not distract from the important part of the move. So, those were our tips on how you can find the right opener and closer to turn your idea or movement into a complete move. Now that you have a complete move, you have reached the last step, which is practicing your move. And we will be giving you guys tips on how to do that in our next tutorial.